Doug White. I'm an urban forestry inspector with the City of Raleigh. I started with the City of Raleigh as a tree planting coordinator to oversee the Neighborhoods program, which was a private-public partnership to plant trees along the streets in the neighborhoods. And then when that program no longer existed, then they moved me into the role as an urban forestry inspector, where now I oversee the development processes that protect trees with tree conservation areas and tree planting. Neighborhoods started in about 2003, I believe, and it went through about 2016. They oversee a federal grant that got the program started. And that program is the city provides trees. The city identifies places in the right-of-way in neighborhoods where trees can be planted. And then they ask the citizens if they're willing to plant the tree and take care of the tree. And so it's a volunteer thing. We don't force anybody to have a tree that doesn't want a tree, but most people are okay with it. And then we will provide the tree. The citizen will plant the tree, water the tree, keep it alive, but it is a city tree that's planted in the city right away. In 2013, the city changed their ordinance, and prior to 2013, the ordinance required trees to be planted on the property of each individual lot or within a development, but they were planted on private property. The city had no control over or very little control over species, the type of care that the tree received. We saw a lot of trees that were planted because of the ordinance, but were not surviving, or if they were living, they were not thriving. The city decided to change the ordinance to require the trees that were being planted as a part of the development to be planted on the city right-of-way in the planting strip. And that way the city would have oversight over species selection, how the tree was planted, and how the tree was cared for. And that is why that the Neighborhoods program was no longer needed, was because the ordinance required trees to be planted in the right-of-way where the Neighborhoods program was operating. So the city reallocated those resources to go from a tree planting coordinator to an urban forestry inspector that would oversee the tree planting in the right-of-way that is now required as a part of the development. Having an urban forestry inspector is important because the city had ordinances, but without having staff to enforce those ordinances, then the ordinances just left up to some people abide by it, some people don't. And we wanted to make sure that we were getting good quality trees throughout the city at every development. And that's why the urban forestry inspector's role is to ensure that we're getting good trees planted correctly in the correct spots, and that these trees will be around for many, many years. Raleigh, being the city of oaks, they want to maintain that green around them for multiple reasons. There's all of the benefits that trees provide us, which is why they need to be considered part of the infrastructure. Part of my job is education, and I'm educating the contractors because they are having to do things a new way, and they're not doing it the way that it's always been done. So I have to explain to them why I want the tree planted a certain way. And it's not because I want to make life hard on them, but it's because I want the tree to survive. I want the tree to have the best growing conditions possible, because a healthy tree has health benefits for everybody. I mean, you have the obvious benefits of the tree producing oxygen and shade and stormwater runoff. Those are obvious benefits. But you also have economic benefits. You have social benefits. There's many benefits to trees. There's been research done that shows that houses that have trees with them tend to, they hold their value longer, and they actually increase in value over houses that don't have trees. You can look at all of the physical benefits of trees, but there's also social benefits. They say you can plant trees near hospitals, and if people in hospital rooms can be able to look out their windows and see trees, then they tend to recover faster. So there's a lot of social benefits that go with trees, in addition to the benefits of stormwater runoff and producing oxygen and that type of thing. But that only happens if you have healthy trees. If you have trees that are dying and diseased, then it actually goes the opposite way. So trees have to be healthy, and they have to be well taken care of. So as an urban forestry inspector, I have to enforce the ordinances that have been in place to plant trees. But when I do that inspection to make sure that the trees are planted, I have to go by what's in we also have a city tree manual. And the city's tree manual outlines the specific planting standards, the care standards, mulching standards, all of that. So we have standards based on the ANSI A300 standards, which is American National Standards Institute. And we do all of this, again, to make sure that we're going to having good, viable trees that are going to live for a long time and provide the citizens with benefits for quite some time. So the tree has to be planted correctly. We need to make sure it's planted at the correct depth. We need to make sure that the roots are free to grow, that there's nothing restricting the roots like wire baskets or the burlap that the trees come in. So we want to make sure that they're planted correctly, and then after we plant it, we want to make sure that it's mulched correctly also. For quite some time, industry standards have been to just put as much mulch on top of the tree as possible, and research has shown that that's actually detrimental. It was probably done thinking that we were doing something good for the tree, but again, research has shown that while that may have been well-intentioned, it actually has the opposite effect. By having too much mulch on the tree, the roots don't get enough oxygen, and if you have the mulch against the bark of the tree, it's very similar to having the wood in your house being exposed to moisture. And when wood is exposed to moisture, it decays and it rots. So we want to keep the mulch away from the bark of the tree, and we really want about a depth of about 2 or 3 inches. And we want to try to get away from volcanoes and think more along the lines of donuts instead of volcanoes. Flooding is an issue in the urban forest. It's also the reason why we require buffers on our corridors. And when we do have that flooding, when we have hurricanes or ice storms or things like that, it does put a strain on the city where we have to now divert staff from their normal routine and their normal duties to do storm cleanup, to do debris cleanup, to inspect greenway trails. When we have flooding events, and we've had two or three major flooding events this past year. As a result, we've got several greenway trails that are closed where they've either washed out or bridges have been damaged or things like that. So there is an added expense for the initial cleanup, expense for the rebuilding. We got to keep the green infrastructure in place to minimize that as much as possible, so that when those events do come, when the cyclical events come, the weather events come, that the city can sustain it and they can absorb it. If I could sum up the role of an urban forestry program within a municipality, it would be it's about education. We've got the knowledge that trees are important, that forests are important, that they provide multiple benefits across economic and social and physical area. But we have to educate people. Most people don't even know the tree is there until it's gone. And most people don't understand why trees have to be planted a certain way. Why can't I just stick it in the ground and let the tree grow? Well, because we are trying to educate people to understand that we are trying to mimic nature, and we are trying to plant trees in a way that they grow naturally. We're putting trees in unnatural places and wanting them to grow naturally. So we got to educate people on how to have the healthiest tree out there, how to have the best tree out there, the correct species out there, so that it's not just this generation, but the generations to come after us that can appreciate the benefits of those trees. Forested buffers on water corridors are extremely important because when we do have those flooding events, if the root mat is not there, if the canopy is not there to diffuse the water as it falls from the sky, then it erodes the soil at a faster rate. And if the tree roots are not there, then the water coming through the channel actually cuts the soil much quicker than it does the trees in place. So the trees help to diffuse the rain that's falling, and it also helps to slow down the erosion that's coming across the land. So that's why we require buffers on our streams, because it helps to slow the water down so it's not rushing into the channel all at the same time. It's actually having a chance to soak into the ground before it makes it to the channel. Any property that's 2 acres or greater is required to have buffers on adjacent property and on thoroughfares.